Hi there, this is Kevin Bayuk from Lyft Economy. Before we begin, I wanted to insert a quick request for support for a new Lyft project, the Force for Good Accelerator and Fund. It is the first crowd-funded accelerator and fund, purpose-built to support and develop best for the world certified B Corps. Those are the B Corps that score in the top 10th percentile of all B Corps and set models for how the economy can provide for human needs while benefiting all life. The fund prioritizes women-owned and person-of-color-owned enterprises and also has a bias towards enterprises that embrace democracy and governance and ownership, as well as those that address climate change through their core operations. We've raised over $200,000 at the time of this recording and are very excited about the overwhelming support we've received so far from over 65 investors. To learn more, please visit www.wefunder.com/forceforgood. That is www.wefunder.com/forceforgood. We are incredibly grateful for your support. And now, on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to Next Economy Now. My name is Shawn Berry, and I'm a partner at Lyft Economy. Lyft Economy is an impact consulting firm whose mission is to create, model, and share a locally self-reliant economy that works for the benefit of all life. On this podcast, we highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, diverse, transparent, and whole systems approach to using business as a force for good. Today, I'm happy to have Jessica Bonanno from Democracy Cooperative and Adam Trott from the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives join us. Welcome, Jessica and Adam.
Hi.
Great to have you guys. I'm partial to the stories, right? So I want to love to invite you to share your background. How did you get into this work that you're doing now with your respective organizations? So maybe Jessica, maybe we could start with you.
Sure, yeah. My interest in cooperatives and new economy models generally has its roots in two places. You know, my interest in economic justice work comes from a very, personal experience about what it means to be economically marginalized in the U.S. and the type of indignities that you experience on a day-to-day basis when that is your economic reality. And so, I've been fortunate and privileged to, be able to be in a position to get an education and to develop, skills. But because of my personal background, there's really nothing else that I could imagine doing with that privilege than, working to create conditions where other people don't have to experience that. My interest in employee ownership comes out of a lot of trial and error. I spent my 20s dabbling in every good cause that would have me and finding a lot of dead ends and finding a lot of times that I was hitting a wall because we weren't doing anything to fundamentally address the root causes of some of the social conditions that we were trying to fix. And to me, ownership really gets at that root cause. And so that's why I'm in this work.
And can you share a little bit about your organization?
Great, yeah. So I work for a nonprofit called the Democracy Cooperative. I think it's fair to describe us as a new economy focused group. And our mission, as we see it, is to catalyze the transformation of our economy. And we do that by working to build community wealth and promote a next system anchored in democratic ownership. And as part of that, we encourage, strategies such as broadening ownership and stewardship over capital, democratic workplaces, stabilizing community and emphasizing local, encouraging equitable and inclusive growth, and working on projects that emphasize environmental, social, and institutional sustainability.
All right. Well, sounds like you're on the right show. Wonderful. Adam, how about yourself? You want to share some of your background in the organization you work with?
Sure. So, I grew up in a silver mining town that had been, out of production for about 100 years and managed to get into college. And after that, spent time as a community organizer working with education, then as a political organizer working on voter registration and some of the presidential elections. And then as a union organizer with some statewide and smaller campaigns. And it was the thing that really kind of came back to me was that the participation of members in the models I was working for wasn't something that excited me or them. And that's where I came back to cooperatives and worker cooperatives specifically, to have a real voice, and people have a say in their own economic destiny. And I happened to learn about worker co-ops at UMass Amherst through Julie Graham, and we saw a bunch of co-ops. We visited them, we had internships with them, and I remember Collective Copies. And later on I got a job with Collective Copies, and that really moved me to think about what are worker cooperatives doing together to face the issues that they have, and a lot of them are similar. And that goes right on to what VAWC is. The Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives is a co-op of worker co-ops that is really meant to serve members, and they do that through being a resource and venue for people to share their issues and their goals. We also do educational programs inside for new members and new co-ops, or externally through our certificate in cooperative enterprise at UMass. We have some small legislative engagement work we're doing. We work with conversions. We've supported 6 conversions in the past 8 years. And then we have the Inter-Cooperative Development Fund, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but that's where we sort of modeled a little bit after some international models with the Emilia-Romagna region in Italy.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. Well, again, thanks for both of you being here, and
it's a pleasure.
I just love it when I reached out to Jessica about having her on. She said, "Well, I would love to have Adam on because he has a very different perspective and approach to co-op development." So really appreciate you, Jessica, for bringing in that kind of diversity and counterpoint. And I'd love to maybe pull some of that out a little bit and hear, let's maybe contrast, what you're up to at Democracy Collaborative and what's unique about that, and then contrast that with what's happening at the Valley Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Great. Yeah. So, Adam, if it's all right, I would start by maybe just highlighting what the Valley Alliance and the Democracy Collaborative and most of the groups working in this space do agree on. I think both our organizations define the problem the same way, and we see ourselves as aligned around a similar challenge. And that challenge is that the current system doesn't work for everyone, and it's not producing the types of outcomes that we want to see. And economic, environmental, and social challenges are mounting all around us as a result of that. And so, the need for change, it has moved beyond, what incremental solutions are able to tackle, and suggests that we need, solutions that get at a more, fundamental and systemic level. And, ownership and control of capital is a key, if not the, primary determinant of power in any economic system. And so, by extension, broadening ownership over productive assets in particular, businesses and things like that, is a way to have power shared more broadly, and to have not only, the capture of economic benefits flowing to more people, but also, the types of decisions and priorities that are made, be shared by more people. And so I think that both of our organizations are really aligned around what that problem is and what employee ownership can offer, can bring to that challenge. That being said, I think there are a lot of different ideas about what the best way is to promote more employee ownership. And when it comes to that, there are some differences. Adam, do you want to jump in there?
Well, again, I want to thank you for having me on here. Jessica, I feel like where I would agree is that, we have one of the widest gaps in wealth in the history of the world. And the current economic model is really only working to help that. Profits are continuing to go up for the top 1% or 0.1%, and they're continuing to go down as far as income for the bottom 90. That's something we really have to take a look at. And I feel as though innovations with macroeconomics or having altered capitalism forms is really problematic, and I think we need to take a good hard look at what kind of models we're using for municipal and regional economic development to make sure we're rooting jobs and wealth in our communities.
So sounds like some strong alignment there for sure, and I could throw my hat in that ring as well. But I'm curious to hear some of the distinctions then from your respective approaches.
Great. Well, maybe it'd be good to talk about just sort of what those approaches are as a start. So I can say that the Democracy Collaborative, though our mission is a little more broad than cooperative development, in the cooperative development space, we're best known for a multi-stakeholder approach that uses cooperative business as a tool for job creation and community stabilization in low-income communities. And the model that we're best known for that illustrates that is one that a lot of people are familiar with, which is known as the Cleveland model, or the Evergreen Cooperative Initiative. And that was really an experiment that came out of, folks here in Cleveland, in positions of leadership in philanthropy, in city government, at the institutions, recognizing that they needed to try, new solutions to try and solve some of the, tremendous challenges that deindustrialization had created in our communities, especially in terms of high unemployment, generational poverty, and things like that. And so a lot of those community leaders sort of got together and asked, kind of what else can we do to leverage our resources, to leverage our purchasing power, to leverage our, talent and knowledge in a way that would have an impact. And what grew out of that was a network of cooperative businesses. There are 3 currently, and eventually, hopefully, will be more, that were created around stated supply chain needs at large institutions like hospitals and universities, created to serve those supply chain needs so that the businesses could be stable. And especially with startups, it's difficult to bring a business to the point where it can, get off the ground and be profitable. And so that those anchor institution partnerships, were designed to address that. And philanthropic capital was also involved, in providing early financing and helping to overcome barriers to access to capital to start these businesses. And so the Democracy Collaborative, worked with some of the partners here in Cleveland to help with the design and implementation of this initiative. And what came out of that was the development of an industrial laundry, a energy efficiency company that began as a solar installation business and now has pivoted toward LED retrofits and more just general green construction, and a large industrial scale hydroponic greenhouse, which produces hydroponic lettuce as well as a variety of different herbs and other crops that they're experimenting with. And so these businesses were incubated in this multi-stakeholder context and now provide jobs to, I think, 120 was the most recent count of workers from low-income communities, including about 40% reentry, and as well as some refugees, some international refugee communities. And then, because these businesses have been built as cooperatives, many of those employees go on to become worker owners. So I think the number is somewhere around 40%. Maybe 30% of those total employees have become members and are participating in governance and profit sharing. So that's sort of the model of cooperative development that we're known for. But I think that the multi-stakeholder approach, the incubation approach, the use of outside capital, that's not really representative of cooperative development across the entire space. And it's really just sort of one experimental take on how to move to scale. And so that's why I think, Adam brings a really interesting perspective on how to do that from a more community-driven and self-organized perspective.
Well, before we hear from Adam, how long has it been since the first Evergreen Co-ops launched?
Oh, the Cooperative Laundry launched in 2009, so that business is now just about 7 years old. The second one came online shortly thereafter, and the greenhouse launched in 2013.
And I remember, so I've been following, I think, again, just think it's a really important, innovative, and exciting model. Was there a support cooperative, or is that Democracy Collaborative providing kind of this back office function?
No. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Democracy Collaborative is no longer involved with ongoing operations at the Evergreen Cooperatives, and that's by design, and that's a success. Those businesses and that initiative are now operating independently, but they have innovated a lot around. I think so. I have a background in startup business development, and I think when you get started in developing new businesses, there are just inevitably breakdowns and problems and craziness all over the place. It's kind of the name of the game. And so one of the early challenges that came up was that you had 3 startup businesses who were each footing the bill for their own back office function, HR, finance, those sorts of things. And so at some point it was, they realized that they could achieve, I guess for lack of a better word, economies of scale by combining that into a single group. But that group is actually a nonprofit, a 501c3. That's not a cooperative. And so there is a nonprofit backbone organization that attends to a lot of the mission related and also the sort of ongoing back office support services of the initiative.
Okay, great. So that's still in place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wonderful. Adam, let's hear more about your work and what might be different about your approach.
Sure, yeah. The Valley Alliance started because cooperators felt as though the traditional model of nonprofit development wasn't working for them. We have a fairly prominent and by many means successful, by many measures successful development organization that covers our area. And people wanted to, people felt as though there were gaps in the services they wanted. There was inconsistent support and it was expensive. Now, this is a different model than what Evergreen is, but what we were trying to do was figure out how, nonprofits do a lot of important work in our country. Sadly, these are things that our state doesn't cover. Our nation state does not cover a lot of things like where there's needle exchanges, hospitals, a lot of educational programs. These things are really important. We felt as though when it came to cooperative development, we wanted to see where the cooperative principles and values would guide us, as well as what international models were telling us what was successful. People talk about Mondragon and people talk about Emilia-Romagna and even Quebec or France. And they founded meso-level cooperatives where individual co-ops had a say in what their development and what the education and the funding was going to be for their co-ops. And they happen to also be the largest cooperative complexes in the world with the most success, highest standards of living, started in a fascist country. With, Mondragon, they were being bombed by their own army. These are places where they had to survive. And what we wanted to do is try to figure out what social inventions they had that we could apply here. And I remember, in fact, was talking with Jessica earlier, when we were talking about putting this together, everybody said we couldn't do it. You can only do that in Spain. You can only do that in Italy. And they wake up as cooperators. They're born that way. Well, when visiting Mondragon, I brought up that perspective. They were talking about how hard they work, the sociology programs, the education. And I said, well, everyone in America thinks you all just kind of get up and start working together. Like you can't help but agree. And, their thought was that's you not holding yourself accountable to your own principles. Mm. And we really kind of took that to heart. And when we were forming our organization, we wanted co-ops as close to the issues as we could get. So we have a member board. We've got co-ops that direct the entity, and me as executive director, I just listen to them. And we've been formalized for about 8 years now. And so it's a different kind of development. And we also don't reflect typical cooperative development in the United States. I would say neither of our models do per se. Mm. And what's interesting is that there aren't a lot of worker cooperative developers that can get fired by their constituents. And I'm one. And I'm only one part of this whole organization. The credit is all about what member co-ops have done, have stepped up to, have opted to pay for. And I think our track record just speaks for itself.
Well, one thing I wanted to hear more, you mentioned earlier, is the Inter-Co-op Development Fund. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. And that comes straight out of our studies of Emilia-Romagna, which Urban Kroll, now of the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, was a big part of, where we try to, again, take a look at what was working. And in talking to a lot of people about these things since, we feel as though it's been true that if the funds are coming from cooperatives, well, let me kind of start with what we found, which is in 1994, cooperatives went to the government of Italy and said, hey, if you want to be a co-op in Italy, it means you have to contribute to the movement that's created your opportunity. What that meant to them was 3% of their surplus went into a fund that then went to develop cooperatives. And you can choose the leftist fund, you can choose the Catholic one, you can choose the centrist one. It's apolitical, it doesn't matter. What really mattered was that co-ops and their fingerprints was on those funds. And they're extremely productive. They have very high growth rates. The social cooperatives that have taken over Italy is among the fastest growing models that they have of cooperatives that we have in the world. So what we did in VAWC was to say in our membership agreement, if you want to be a member, 5% of your surplus goes into a fund that's owned by VAWC itself. Since then, we've made a couple of loans, and they've been loans that no one else wanted to make. We're fortunate to live in an area where there's the Cooperative Fund of New England, there's Shared Capital Cooperative, people who are really smart, really good at lending money to co-ops, but sometimes it's too risky. And we felt as though there was room to make loans that made sense that were also risky. And we've been active in that since then.
So I'm curious, how does the decision making work? I imagine if you asked all your membership organizations, anybody needs some extra capital or resources, raising their hands. And I think this also just gets to some of the basic dynamics of working in cooperatives and also some of the maybe limited outside perception of just not understanding how such a thing could work out, because of course everybody's going to want to grab the money for themselves. So curious how this actually plays out for you.
Well, I mean, you're citing an oft-quoted, since the Fabian socialists of the late 1800s, they've been saying workers would pay themselves out of a job. That's just, consumer is king. We need to, only have consumers. That's who's going to regulate our cooperative economy. And what I would like to say, and in fact, this kind of goes back to what Jessica was saying a little bit, where to me, when I hear multi-stakeholder, what I hear is you've got consumers on one side, workers on another, maybe producers on yet another, all at the same table, making decisions together. That's what I want. That's what we're all working for. Mm-hmm. And what I feel as though, I think to try to step back from a silver bullet mentality, it's going to take working together across sectors and to be strong in our identities and moving forward.
Yeah, well, thank you, Adam, and I'll build on that by saying, agreeing that we need a plurality of solutions, right? So it's not just that we figured it out. Well, they're in Massachusetts, they got it all covered, and we just all have to do like that. It's really about sharing the diversity of successes that exist simultaneously and helping, offering those forward, helping people, select the solution sets that potentially work best for their situation. So we definitely see that same thing.
I think that's right, Shawn. And, and I think that, with all of these new economy models, we're really at the beginning. We're really at the R&D, stage, if you will. And, taking a pluralist approach and keeping an open mind and keeping an orientation. I don't know, in Buddhism, we call it beginner's mind, right? Like keeping an orientation toward curiosity and toward learning what we can learn from these models, I think, is the way that we're going to discover what works and what doesn't and learn together, so that, potentially future generations can have more definitive models to work with.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to finish the thought, even to build on it, we call this podcast Next Economy Now, because we feel there's actually abundant solutions in place around the world. They're just not very well known. So we're kind of taking the position that we just need to share these out. Of course, we'll continue to develop and evolve, and there's room for more of that too. But we're kind of just calling it out and saying we have some pretty good solution sets existing, and so let's kind of get the word out about them. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what are some of the, besides the the work and the examples that you're embodying in your own organizations and some of that you referenced, what else are you seeing in trends for co-op development? Are you seeing more co-ops? Are you seeing more recognition? Because I still get in the circles that I travel in, people that just don't really know it's an option for a given business. Yeah, maybe they've heard of a co-op grocery store or a bakery or childcare or something common, but the fact is they exist in every sector of the economy. So I'm curious, what are some of the trends that you both are seeing?
Yes, so I can say a few things about that. So I agree with your observation that there's a lack of awareness, not only about cooperatives, but about employee ownership models generally. I think the U.S. Federation puts out that there are somewhere between 300 and 400 worker cooperatives in the U.S. And even if you expand it all the way out and you look at, other employee ownership models like ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, I think the number only goes as high as, 7,000 or somewhere. So in terms of a percentage of the economy, that's still really, really, minimal. And so, we've been thinking a lot in our work and with our partners about what are some of the barriers to scale employee ownership models, and particularly about democratic employee ownership models like cooperatives. And I think awareness is really key. I think there's a very strong and passionate, and growing group of enthusiasts who believe in this. And I think models like Evergreen that are that are sort of planting a flag and that are very visible have done a lot to raise, awareness in the mainstream and to inspire interest in these models. But by and large, there's a lot of work to be done.
Adam?
Yeah, I feel like, again, one of the trends that we saw as a system was that despite international models and, decades of experience, there was a lot of dependency on nonprofit models to get development going and to continue it now that it's been, 15 years since the Federation was started. And what we wanted to do was to say, can we start an engine? First of all, can we have cooperatives enter the dialogue? And I don't mean people representing cooperatives. I don't mean someone who's at a board of another organization. I mean cooperators whose livelihood depends on their co-op, up and talking about what these models are and what they mean to them. And then can we sort of develop a set of leadership that communicates those goals and needs to our larger organizations. So VAWC sought to take some of the thoughts of worker cooperatives to a meso-level organization that then did all these other things, engaged national leadership, talked to the Federation, talked cross-sector. We're working so closely with food co-ops, I never thought we would out here in Western Mass. It was just something that was kind of beyond my understanding, and thank you to the NFCA for being so great to us. But, what I think that where I would like to see the trend go is having the voice continue to be coming from cooperators. And when I see a model laid out, I feel like, Jessica and I get to talk about this all the time because she's such a close work partner for me, is that, one of the worries that I have is that you have a larger scale project than VAWC, say, in the Evergreen model, and you've got, a lot of media attention. We're talking about invisibility. Well, how are things invisible? You don't get media coverage, you don't get educational coverage, and they're a marginal part of the economy. Well, we can debate that because credit unions is 100 million members. So what's going on? I don't think that co-ops are understanding that they need to make their own argument. We're relying on models that aren't ours to do it. And I get worried personally that, having seen some of the incubator models out there work and then not work, there's a lot of attention paid, a lot of money given. Things don't work out so well. Members don't have the buy-in, and then things go south. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen to Evergreen. But what I want is underserved communities and anybody who gets involved in co-ops to think, man, I can't believe I feel so fortunate to be running this show. And I'm going to make mistakes. And it's just all on me. We can't blame anybody. We got to take a strong look at ourselves. So I see the trend going away from that, and I'm concerned.
Well, I'm curious from your own experience. Maybe this is a more personal question, but can you share something that you've learned? It's either best practice or a learning, a realization from trying to work in the context of democratic workplace and extending ownership.
A lot of this comes back. It can sound really cheesy, but
that's okay.
When you take a look at, since 1895, the International Cooperative Alliance has tried to develop a set of principles and values to guide co-ops, what it means, maybe some best practices, just like what you said, but also larger goals, where we're striving towards. What are we trying to do this for? And Rochdale was founded on a cross-sector vision that had workers and consumers together. Things changed. And then in centuries before that, we had countries doing wonderful things that were cooperative. I feel like what's special about Rochdale was their ability to deal with an industrialized economy. But for me, what I think is not what I would like to see more of is the organizations that are performing development to have a long-term investment in their success. That's where I feel like work begins to improve. For example, I know that if the co-ops I support don't work well, they're going to take a pretty good hard look at me and the work that I'm doing. And what's been beautiful is to be able to have member co-ops who support education, who support non-revenue generating activity, to say, yeah, we want to market these co-ops. We want to build programs where they work together. We're going to work across sectors to build an identity together. To say, hey, you're a food co-op. You use the same principles and values that we do. How can we build something together?
Jessica, any learnings or best practices to share?
Yeah, well, I want to say that I do learn a lot from my work partnership with Adam, and Adam, I really appreciate the vision that you lay out about co-ops leading the movement, leading the effort to raise awareness, leading in their own companies and communities. I think one of the biggest lessons learned with Evergreen is just what a dance it is, what a dance self-governance really is, and how difficult it is to navigate the trade-offs, between running a business of scale that's in startup mode, that has to compete, with companies that are not measuring a triple bottom line, that are not, concerned with, paying living wages or operating in environmentally sustainable ways, and what that really looks like. And I think with the Evergreen Cooperatives, they've been a sort of beautiful experiment in how to make those decisions and trade-offs at on different ends of the spectrum. I think when they were founded, they were very collectivist, I think, in their decision-making processes. And they experienced business challenges, operational challenges, profitability challenges, not necessarily directly as a result of that, but as a result of not having industry leadership able to operate nimbly and make decisions. In response, they brought in a lot of industry experts who were able to help right the ship, but who were not cooperators themselves, and who had to really learn a different style of management. And that was I think a messy process for a while, according to the worker owners that I've spoken to. And now things have started to settle back toward a happy center. So at the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry, which is right now the most profitable and stable of the three businesses, the employee participation has really blossomed in some very meaningful ways over the last year. For the first time in the March member meeting, the workers at Evergreen Laundry were able to vote as to whether or not to renew the contract of their manager, of their CEO, who is not himself a member and isn't eligible, and they made the decision to renew that contract. But anyway, the thing was, it was kind of beautiful to see the initial vision of participatory management beginning to come into fruition into the right way. So I think that incubated models like Evergreen could learn a lot from the decades and even centuries of history that have gone into best practices development. And I guess the biggest takeaway, though, is just this is hard stuff. This is not easy, and there aren't a lot of easy answers. So.
Well, on that note, kind of the other side of the best practice question is what are some of the big challenges that we're up against?
Oh, you want to ask us? Well,
not all of them, but
I was fortunate enough to be part of a small group that wrote a book called Building Co-op Power, and one of the things we focused on was that there is a strong invisibility, let's say, a profound invisibility of our model about co-ops, and a lot of people who are part of them don't even know. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about professional support, whether it's legal or accounting or group process, mm-hmm. there's no context for people to understand what it means to be in a cooperative. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're taught this in like middle school or high school or anything like that. These are not part of our societal programming. So I feel like one of the things that we're trying to do in VAWC is to say, if you want to work with us, this is kind of, we're so focused and excited about trying to go as close to co-op as we can. To go back to what Jessica is kind of saying, like, as far as scale, we might have an interesting interpretation of scale, because, so to me, what is scale? Do we just want a large co-op where there's thousands of members and let's say an unrefined process of participation? Is that what we're going for? Or are we trying to have more of a context, more of a texture, more of a set of relationships across businesses that's going to experience and handle economic changes, shifts and trends of business, industry, entertainment, retail? And for me, I would rather have something that's not in the too big to fail realm. Not that Evergreen is like that. There's, both of our organizations are small at largest. But that's one of the big ones. I feel like co-ops aren't owning their identity. It's one of the best models there are in the world to handle how we're going to make choices about our housing, our food, our farms, and our jobs. And we're not owning that. We're not owning the story, the beauty of it. I feel like we need to really be strong on that.
Wonderful. Jessica, what do you see as big problems?
Yeah, I laughed when you asked that question too, because it's sort of like where do you begin? As I mentioned, I've got some experience in startup business investing and in startup business development. And even when you're not trying to do a socially responsible business or an employee-owned business. Business development is just really, 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 really hard. Raising funds is really hard. Competing in the marketplace is really, really hard. And so when you bring, to that context, a company that is, concerned with process, that has, goals beyond, simply, profitability and surviving, it's a big, project to manage, and it's a huge challenge. And I see a lot of interest in cooperatives and cooperative development throughout the country among the traditional, nonprofit, or political left. And a lot of times, in those sectors, there's a lack of industry and business development knowledge that really, I think, hinders, progress. And likewise, on the other side, this model is so, or these models rather, are so well established and have demonstrated impact on, productivity and sustainability of business operations, and yet the business community is almost entirely unaware. So I guess the biggest challenge for me is kind of sorting through the Tower of Babel and bringing together kind of the strange bedfellows that are required to work in partnership if we're going to move from 300 and 400 cooperatives and 7,000 employee-owned businesses to any sort of significant and meaningful part of the economy. So it's a big challenge.
Yes, we will need some wide-scale cooperation across sectors for sure. Well, on that note, I mean, what do you see for the future 25, 50, 100-year vision, and what role might co-ops play?
Adam, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I can start.
Sure.
I feel what I see are a lot of people who are unhappy with the existing system and what it's been offering them, and having a new energy to see what another model can do. And what I would like to see is that cooperatives, especially worker cooperatives, as that's the closest sector that I work in, that's the one closest to me, act with open arms, open hearts, and strong commitments to each other to build resource pools to change our economy, to really have the kind of input, the democratic process, and the shared resource pools we need to improve each other's lives, to improve the access to decent things like maybe healthcare, housing, jobs, and food, to make sure that we're acting in cohesion with each other, in harmony with the environment, and to try to have this whole economy be based on what people want to do, not what's most profitable, and having all of our investments and all the time we spent developing these organizations go by the wayside because a trend changed in another country. So what I see is people acting together with unity around the cooperative model and changing our societies like they have in other countries.
Is that the 25-year version or the 500-year version?
Yeah, maybe I'm bad with it. No, I think it's going to be soon. Like, I really feel as though there's enough traction across cooperatives. Maybe this is just a regional bias I have, but people seeing how they can get farther faster together across sectors, and where we can achieve density in a certain model, we can do that with another model or another industry or another type of business. So I would say that's maybe between 25 and 50. Would that make sense?
I like it. Jessica, what do you think?
Yeah, so I agree with that, and I'll say two things. One, I think that we are kind of at a key point in history where we really stand before two potential paths. The trends that we're seeing with widening inequality, impact on the environment, et cetera, I don't expect those to reverse if we keep doing things in the same ways. I think on one hand, we have an opportunity now because we stand on decades of work, because we have demographic factors in our favor. We have an opportunity to choose a different way of organizing ourselves and our work and our labor. And also, it would be very easy to miss this opportunity and to continue with status quo models that aren't producing the right outcomes. So I want to look back on this point in time as, the prehistory to the revolution. I want to look back on this point in time as sort of the spark that lit the fire, of sustainable change. And whether that's a 20 or 30 or 50-year goal, I'm not sure. I've been proud to be, involved with some analysis recently looking at, what what is an achievable goal for the future, and what are the barriers to scale, and what solutions can we design, specifically to address those strategies. There's a group of us that's been tossing around an audacious goal, 50 by 50, meaning 50 million employee owners by 2050. And it seems to have a nice ring to it. And I'd like to be a part of thinking through what it might take to achieve that. So I think, if the sector, is smart about it, if as Adam points out, if principles are emphasized and meaningful change is built into the system, then maybe one day in 2050 or beyond, we might look back on this time, as the catalytic moment. And I hope we do.
Wonderful. I love it. Let's go 50 by 50. I'm in.
Woo!
One of our last questions here as we wrap up. Who are you watching, or who's inspiring you? Is there a book? Is there a particular leader, particular organization, particular group that you're getting a lot of inspiration out of?
Wow, that's a good one.
I can throw a couple of things out there, Jessica.
Go for it.
So your namesake, but Jessica Gordon-Emhart wrote a wonderful book called Collective Courage, which is about cooperatives in the African American community in history. It's a fantastic book and really grapples with what is now a myth, that co-ops and people of color haven't worked together well. In fact, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom came out of four of the organizers lived together in a housing co-op. A. Philip Randolph. I mean, it's just
beautiful.
Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph are in the same housing co-op. So that's a wonderful book. I feel like Jessica is a living, like a wonderful, beautiful resource, and she's so friendly. That's definitely one person. I don't know, Jessica, if you have someone you want to put in there.
Yeah, in the co-op and employee ownership space, I'm not sure. I think I know a lot of my peers, as well as I, draw a lot of inspiration from social movements that have been successful in the past. Personally, I also draw inspiration from, examples of innovations and industry transformations. I mean, even something like, just looking at how we've moved from technology, as a nascent concept and a fringe thing, to how ubiquitous it is now, and what can we study and learn from, other large scale, systemic innovations like that to inform, how we can do our work in a more impactful way. So, yeah, I guess maybe my approach is just to adopt that curiosity and that beginner's mind, to all of the world around us, and to draw inspiration from that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can see that. Looking at just development trends on human culture in general. And
Shawn, could I add a couple of things to that?
Yeah, please.
It's not as kind of uplifting as what Jessica was saying. I do just want to say that, what other things that I'm watching that I feel like are important is the U.S. Federation, United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. I feel like that's an important organization. The Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, traditionally a wonderful venue for cooperators and member owners, worker owners, to work together to try to address their issues. I also think that John Ristakis' book, Humanizing the Economy, is a beautiful contribution to our movements. And, I feel like it's been great to have people like you, Shawn, who have an interest and follow through to give us an opportunity to talk about our models. And I'm really excited about what the future holds. Lastly, I would say that, and I'm a recently enrolled student, so I'm kind of excited right now. Maybe this is a time bias, but Sobey Business School's St. Mary's University Cooperative Management Education Program in Halifax, Canada is a fantastic resource for people to see. And it's a great place to go and learn about co-ops from kind of head to toe, history, culture, and everything.
Wow.
I thought you said you weren't going to say anything inspiring.
It wasn't as moving as yours. It's factual.
Try to stop him. Try to stop him. This guy's full of solutions. I love it. And I'll have it be known, I'm not just a sideline supporter of cooperatives. I'm a worker owner myself.
Fantastic.
For, 18 years, something like that. So this is my second worker-owned cooperative, Lift Economy.
This is fantastic.
Yeah. So
he's going to let that out of there. He's going to drop that bomb on the way out.
It's not bomb. It's the way of life, right? I've been doing it since
that's wonderful.
So, But yeah, I wanted to slide that in. Well, really appreciate both you being here. Want to offer you just on the way out, any final thoughts to share, and also any calls to action, any supports needed, and how can people get in touch with you or your organizations?
So the Democracy Collaborative has a great website resource that I'd love to share with you, which is found at community-wealth.org. And on there, you can find just a wealth of information, video, media, links to great projects across the country on not just employee ownership in cooperatives, but the whole universe of new economy activity that we follow and find interesting. So I would invite anybody who's either new to this stuff or hoping to develop more depth to visit us there and to engage with us through that resource.
Great. Adam?
Yeah, you can find the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives on the web, valleyworker.coop. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter too, and find out about our activities. And you can also email me or anyone, but it's adam@valleyworker.coop with any questions or thoughts. And, it just leads me to say thank you so much to both of you. And I really appreciate the opportunity, Jessica, to be able to talk to you about these things as people who work in kind of different venues. And it's just been a wonderful experience to share together and learn from each other.
Indeed, it's my pleasure. It's so great to be with you both. I admire your work so much, and thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Doing the series justice here, Next Economy Now, by sharing these solution sets. So I really appreciate you both. And my name is Shawn Berry. You can reach me, Shawn, SHAWN, at lifteconomy.com. More information on Lift Economy, lifteconomy.com. And you can also find our blog through our website. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shawn.
Bye-bye.
Take care.